call them and just see what the problem might be. Active.
Yeah, just let them know
Okay.
that you might have to be calling them or something like that.
Yeah, was it asleep, did it seem like?
It looked like it was
Shut down.
almost. But when I went back there, okay, is it lowercase or capital? Capital.
Capital?
Exclamation point.
No numbers. They changed it. I don't know why, but it's in our. Hi, good morning.
Yeah,
Both of you have been logged and you can call when you play some.
Perfect. Yeah, you can just say it's recommended that it's a 3%. Yeah. That's fine. No. Yes. Good answer.
Yeah, well, may I ask maintenance costs?
back?
We'll turn it in. They aren't here yet.
Okay.
So I don't want to not.
Perfect. No worries. Thank you. You don't, Kathleen? Yes. Thank you. They're coming in? I'm sorry? Yeah. All right, Kathleen. Okay. Yeah, in the corner.
Can you hear me okay?
The mic's on.
Okay. Now are they on? If not, I'll just yell. You don't have to split. I'll be like the Wizard of Oz. Good morning, everybody. We will start our meeting, and it's about 10:05, and we want to wish everybody happy holidays. The meeting's called to order at 10:05, and we have the Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem, which will be performed by students from the Arizona School for the Arts Chamber Singers, accompanied by their music director, Ms. Dana Bender. And I just want to give you a little bit of information on them. The Arizona School for the Arts is a 24-year-old nonprofit public charter school where no prior arts experience is required and all students are welcome. The ASA Chamber Singers consist of students selected by audition and at the recommendation of both artistic and academic staff. Today we have 15. Is that right? Do we still have 15? We have 15 of our 25 skilled singers at this highest level of choir to share their gift of song. They are led by, as I said, Dana Bender, who was previously with a Grammy Award-winning group and has been a leader and teaching artist at ASA for 10 years, and they look fantastic. Following them, we will have our opening prayer by Mr. Stephen Berg. Thank you, and you can proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the National Anthem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The holiday song?
Yes.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Everywhere you go, take a look at the flag and tag, listening once again, with candy and smells to go. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Toys in every store, but the prettiest sight you see is the one on your own front door.
A pair of photo ornaments in my best so that yours is a wish of money and fun. First of all, talking about love for a while is the hope of Chuckies and Jen.
And mom and dad can hardly wait for school to start again. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Soon the lights will start, and the thing that will make them ring is the carol that you sing within your heart.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. Like Christmas. Wow. It's beginning to look a lot like.
And mom and dad can hardly wait for school to start again.
I can hardly wait for school to start again.
Beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Soon the lights will start, and the thing that will make them ring is the carol that you sing within your heart. Right within your heart.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Very good. Awesome.
That's awesome.
You guys are fantastic.
Don't normally get treated to for Park Harmony.
Mr. Bird. Let's stand.
Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Parent, parents of heaven, earth, and all humankind, we come before you this day at the opening of the Arizona Department of Education Board meeting with repentance. We are sorry that we haven't been able to establish a better education system for those who are going to lead our future. We come on the shoulders of giants, yet we have not been able to lay our individual ambitions and limited thinking aside. We ask you to come and join in this meeting, that this can be a great leap forward, that we can leave some of the struggles and strife and small-minded thinking behind, to make decisions and have deliberations that will help the leaders of the future to blossom, to flourish, to grow into better people than we ourselves are. We are humbled to serve, to come to this place to help others to become better than us. And we just thank you and ask that you can join with us in this meeting, that we can leave all the small stuff behind and beside and allow you to work in the midst of our deliberations. We ask this all in name of all the great saints and sages of the past, specifically Jesus and the Holy Spirit and all other of our good ancestors to be here. Thank you, Staffan and Jane Berg, blessed Central family. Adu, Amin, Aho, Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Roll call.
President Narducci,
Here.
Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman.
Here.
Member Broussard.
Present.
Member Baker.
Present.
Member Chang. Member Kay.
Present.
Member Mack. Member Burton.
Here.
Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before I start, wasn't that choir amazing? Yeah. I mean, just absolutely amazing. They sounded like they should be recorded and played on the 99.9 or whatever the Christmas radio is. Regular Christmas radio. We'll proceed with our normal agenda, and we'll go with the President's report first. And I have one item of business on the President's report, and I'll be appointing Member Burton, Member Kay, and Member Ruiz to the nominating committee. Members, please prepare a slate ahead of the January 27th State Board meeting. The board will vote on leadership at that meeting. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Hoffman, welcome on the phone, and if you could please provide your report, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Very well.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and happy holidays. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person today. Before I start with my report, I want to quickly recognize that today's meeting takes place on the traditional lands of the O'odham, Yavapai, and Hohokam people. We are grateful for their past and present contributions to our community. For one quick update, last week I had the opportunity to visit schools in Graham County, Greenlee County, and the San Carlos Apache tribe. It was such a wonderful trip that truly highlighted the diverse opportunities available to our students. And it also marked a milestone for my administration, as now I've visited schools in all 15 counties in Arizona. Next, I'm very excited to announce that we have 3 student advisors from our new Student Advisory Council that will be presenting a report based on their first meeting that was held about a month ago. These students traveled from across the state to be here today, to be there with you, and I'm incredibly impressed by their leadership, collaboration, and dedication to Arizona. Today's presenters are Blanca Breton, who is an 8th grader from Douglas High School in Douglas, Arizona. Sophia Rosa, an 8th grader at Colonel Smith Middle School in Sierra Vista. And Tyler Puhuyama, a 5th grader from Washington Elementary in Winslow. So go ahead, students.
Good morning. My name is Blanca Breton. I'm a junior in Douglas High School. In November, 20 students from all around Arizona came together to discuss the issues in Arizona schools. To start off the meeting, we began by creating norms for the advisory council. Following after, we introduced ourselves, and we also created the messages for you guys. And this was the poster that we made with some of the things that we believed deserved more funding. Some include campus facilities, classroom stuff like materials, resources, textbooks, technology, teacher salaries, culture programs, transportation like school buses and parking lots for high schools, and mental health resources. These are the main two that we believe deserve more of your attention. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Pahuyama. I live in Winslow, Arizona, where I attend Washington Elementary School. I would like to discuss the importance of culture in education. I feel learning about other cultures helps us communicate better with one another in and outside of school. Culture teaches us values and respect for one another. Therefore, it would be nice to see culture be incorporated in our schools. Thank you.
Good morning, board members. I'm Student Advisory Council Member Sophia Rosa from Colonel Smith Middle School. Colonel Smith Middle School is located on Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Today I will be addressing the need for mental health resources in schools. In the Student Advisory Council meeting, we concluded that schools all over Arizona might want to consider having programs that focus directly on how to deal with depression, stress, anxiety, and other mental health issues that students face on a daily basis. The issues may significantly and negatively affect students' learnings. SADD, S-A-D-D, Students Against Destructive Decisions. SADD clubs are mental health resources that should be incorporated in all schools throughout Arizona. SADD's main mission is to empower young people to successfully confront their emotions, the risks they take, and peer pressures that challenge them throughout their daily lives. Another issue that we talked about is the lack of counselors that focus on the well-being of students as well as the academic success. Finally, with over 4 major military bases in Arizona, David Moffett, Fort Huachuca, Yuma Proving Grounds, and Luke Air Force Base, the Board of Education may want to create a link on their public website to help military families relocating to the great state of Arizona. In conclusion, our Student Advisory Council appreciates your time and support to hear out these issues that affect schools in Arizona. Thank you.
Superintendent Hoffman.
I just want to say thank you so much to Blanca, Sophia, and Tyler for making the trip to be there. I am just, again, so impressed. And thank you for your thoughtfulness and again for your dedication to our public education and public schools. Thank you so much. And that concludes my superintendent report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Hoffman, and thank you for the presentation. And again, thanks for being here as well. Very, very well done and very, very good information. We'll move on to our Executive Director's report. Director Williams, your report, please.
President Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, my report will be brief this morning. The first update is on the iSight database, which is a database, as you all are aware. It's between the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, and our Assistant Attorney General staff to help with educator discipline in the cases that come into the investigative unit. ADE is currently on track for deployment of the new case management system iSight on December 19th, so next week. The investigative unit and ADEIT are working collaboratively to ensure a smooth launch of this platform. The new software uses workflow technology to record, manage, and report the live status of cases within one centralized solution. So we as staffers are very excited for this database. It will allow all three agencies to speak to one another and have that centralized location for all of our cases. Additionally, for educator discipline, we do have multiple sponsors for the bill that this board approved for the next legislative session at our October board meeting. Staff continues to speak on the topic of educator discipline and we are providing training. I myself went to a staff meeting at ASA, the Arizona School for the Arts, and Garnett and Chief Investigator Spelich have spoken to the HR Association at their annual conference, which was held in Prescott a few weeks ago. Both engagements were well attended. And lastly, I also received an invitation to speak at the Governor's Committee, the Justice for Victims of Child Sexual Abuse Task Force. That was also a few weeks ago. Moving on to Yuma, just a reminder that the January 27th State Board of Education meeting will be held in Yuma on Arizona Western's campus. Staff is working on finalizing the schedule for the day. We hope to plan a learning field trip for the members. So if any members or the public have any questions on our meeting in Yuma for January, please reach out to board staff. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to our initial call to the public, we have a hard stop today at 2 o'clock, so we're going to try to move things along as quickly as possible due to members having commitments, some members having commitments elsewhere. So any presentations that are made today, could you please, I don't want to say shorten them, but be as concise as possible, and then leave it open for questions from the members as needed from your presentation. Appreciate that very much. And we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the call to the public. And this is the time for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda and on items that are on the consent portion of the agenda. Comments are to be limited to 2 minutes this morning. And Director Williams, have we received any requests to speak?
President Arducci, members of the board, we have 3 requests to speak for this agenda item. First up, we have Stephen Ugal, followed by Dr. Deborah Dennison.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Do we have materials for the board?
Hello, Chairman Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and Board of Education members. I'm Stephen Ugal, high school junior, here today providing more information to restore the Holocaust education requirement in all Arizona public schools. Teaching the Holocaust in Arizona public schools is necessary. There is a patchwork of Holocaust and genocide curriculum, but not a statewide rule to teach it. In those schools, the facts of the Holocaust are simply left out. There is new research suggesting that Holocaust education changes how kids act. In Friedman's research, students who learned about the Holocaust became more willing to intervene on another's behalf, acting as upstanders for those in othered groups. This is important because in 2018, the Anti-Defamation League reported 22% of anti-Semitic events occurred to students in schools. This year, that number is on the rise. On behalf of those survivors and stakeholders, I am asking today that facts of the Holocaust not be forgotten and not allowed to fade away. 2 no-cost resources available now to support schools are the Anti-Defamation League's Echoes and Reflections Holocaust curriculum, with teaching materials and online lessons at echoesandreflections.org. Also, the Western States Center developed Confronting White Nationalism in Schools Toolkit to help teachers and students dealing with white nationalist extremism in the classroom. In it, they say, everyone has the right to embrace their identity, but white nationalism and other forms of bigoted extremism threaten safety. It robs us of the humanity that links us together, unquote. With these free resources available, there is no excuse to fuel ignorance or denial of the Holocaust in Arizona schools. Please consider stronger language requiring statewide Holocaust education. Thank you, and happy holidays.
Next up, we have Deborah Dennison, followed by Stacy Morley.
Yat Ea Bene, Do Dagot E, Chairman Narduki and Superintendent Hoffman and the rest of the State Board of Education. I thank you for all you do for the state of Arizona and the students of our communities. I'm Dr. Deborah Dennison. I'm currently the superintendent of San Carlos Unified School District, and I know that Superintendent Hoffman mentioned us in her report earlier. I just wanted to come forward and give a warm thank you to Superintendent Hoffman and the new deputy superintendent for Indian Education, Serena Danette Sosi, and the staff that came with her out into our community in San Carlos. In my 17 years of being a school superintendent in Arizona, this is the first time I've spent my career on Indian reservations, because I myself am Navajo, and that's my whole purpose of serving our school systems that serve students on Indian country. And so Superintendent Hoffman had come out, and I know she mentioned she's gone to several school districts throughout Arizona, but mainly thankful for the fact that she spent a whole day with us out in San Carlos and got to see the social and emotional learning components that we have put in place, our whole strategic system that we've overhauled in San Carlos. And we got to share with her one-on-one some of the cultural aspects that are important to teaching and learning for students and community out in San Carlos and all of Indian country. I'm very thankful for that, and I just wanted to share my appreciation to all of you for taking the time of listening to the importance of what was just shared with the students that came forward earlier today. I thank them as well. So, Yehet, on behalf of San Carlos Unified School District and Indian Country, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Stacy Morley.
Good morning, Mr. President, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. My name is Stacy Morley. I'm with Stand for Children. I'm the Government Affairs Director. And I just came to make some comment on a piece that you have on the consent agenda, the approval of the English learner frameworks today. I really just want to take the time and give incredible amount of props to the department, Kate Wright especially, and the staff at OLS and the staff at the State Board, Alicia and Ketcher, for the incredible amount of hard work that they put into creating these frameworks to change the lives of our English language learners, some of our most challenged students. We worked really hard at the Capitol over the last 2 years to get that piece of legislation passed with many of the people in this room, a full stakeholder process, nonpartisan, and but it doesn't mean anything without good implementation. And I think the department and the board has gone above and beyond on what we can do for these students. And I just really want to take the time to thank you for that.
President Arducci, members of the board, that concludes item 2.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3, which is our consent agenda. And before I do so, is Member Mack on the phone? Just so everybody knows, Member Mack today is not here because she's in Texas receiving her doctorate. So it's very cool. I think she was hooded this morning at 9 o'clock our time, 10 o'clock her time. So my executive director doesn't want me to talk about it, so I'll move on. but I think it's pretty cool. On the consent agenda, we have a few of our members that have conflicts. So I'm going to read those, and then we'll go for motions. Read those, we'll go for motions because they're going to have to be removed from voting on them. But since Member Mack is not on the phone, I'm going to ignore the conflict that she has at 3J and then proceeding and including that in our first motion. So Member Welborn will be pulling item 3C due to a conflict. Members Welborn and Kay will be pulling item 3E due to a conflict. Member Mack was going to pull item 3J. However, I'm going to include that in this motion on the consent agenda. So do I have a motion to approve items 3A, 3B, 3D, 3F through 3I and 3J?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, those pass. So item 3C, Member Welborn is abstaining from this vote. Do I have a motion to approve item 3C?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3E, members Kay and Welborn will be abstaining from this vote. Do I have a motion to approve item 3E?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And 3J's done. Very good. We're done with item 3. We'll move on to item 4, which is our call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on the general session. Comments, again, are limited to 2 minutes. Director Williams, do we have anybody who's requested to speak?
President Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, we do have, I believe, 9 requests to speak. First up, we have Mary Jo Mulligan, followed by Diana Asseri, which I apologize, I most likely said that name wrong.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. My name is Mary Jo Mulligan. I'm the principal at Thunderbolt Middle School in Lake Havasu City. Thunderbolt is home to almost 900 7th and 8th grade students. We transition 7th graders from 9 schools, including charter, private, and district. Every year, we replace half of our school population as our 8th graders move to the high school and 7th graders join us. I'd like to share my concerns with the current letter grade system for middle schools. Thunderbolt has been an F, a B, and a C. Some middle school data from the state. In Mojave County, there were no A's and B's. There was 1 C, and the rest are D's and F's. Rural middle schools, 20% A's and B's. And once we add the metro in, 36% are A's and B's. How many metro middle schools are actually K-8 schools? If growth is 50% of a letter grade, how can K-8 and 2- and 3-year middle schools possibly be labeled with the same formula? It doesn't seem equitable. If the purpose of the letter grade is to accurately reflect a school's academic achievement, I urge the board to reconsider the formula that includes 2- and 3-year middle schools with K-8 schools. And finally, don't ever forget there are people behind these letters of the alphabet. 2 years ago, I was a failure, an F. I took it more seriously than you can imagine. I carried that failure with me every day and everywhere I went in my small town. It was a shame I had never experienced. You see, my school wasn't a failure, I was a failure. And sometime in April, 1 year after testing, we became a D. To this day, I have no idea how that happened. And D isn't good, but it's not failing. And last year we were a B. We celebrated, but not too much, because we still didn't understand the formula or what it means. And this year we're a C by 1/2 of a point. I have a better understanding of the formula, and that is this. It's impossible to explain to others. It's impossible to use to identify areas of growth. So this time we continue to meet the academic, behavioral, and emotional needs of students every day, regardless of our letter grade. If the intent of the letter grade is to reflect a school's academic performance, please create a formula for middle schools that is equitable and compares like schools with one another. With all due respect, this formula does neither. Thank you.
Diana Assier, followed by Robert Carlisle.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Narducci, I apologize. My name gets butchered all the time. It's Assier. Sorry. That's okay. Superintendent Hoffman, it's nice to hear you on the phone, and of course, members of the board. My name is Diana Assier, and I am the superintendent for Lake Havasu Unified School District. I did provide a handout to the board, and I'm hoping that I can reference it now. And I apologize because I did make the plan for this presentation on a 3-minute schedule. I provided for you 3 pages. The first page of the handout is our district's results. And what you can see is our 6 elementary schools peak at about 5th grade. They show growth. I actually have 4A and 2B elementary schools because they have powerful growth. About 5th grade, scores begin to drop, with some exceptions, but that's pretty much the pattern. And then you can see that our scores decline through 11th grade. When you look at the second chart, this is our district compared to the state. So looking again at the state averages, the state peaks at about 5th grade, and then scores steadily decline up until 11th grade. On this one, I also included our ACT results compared to the state. This got me curious, and so I pulled out all of our counties. The third chart shows every county in the state of Arizona, and while the pattern is a little bit erratic for some places because size does matter when we look at the averages, pretty much consistently, our scores peak at 5th grade and then decline. So what was fascinating about this is this upward trend. Elementary schools do well because of the 50% growth in our grading system. But then as they begin to decline starting in 5th grade, that penalizes the students that are in the upper grades and the schools that serve those students. In grades 3 through 5, students are assessed on their reading ability as they progress in learning to read. The assessments through grade 5 include skills and concepts and reading standards for literary and informational texts, but they also include the reading foundational standards. Beginning in grade 6, students are assessed on their ability to read to learn. Literary and informational text length and complexity increase, as do the depth of knowledge levels and the questions regarding strategic thinking. I spent some time reviewing all of the materials available on the AZM2 on the website. The blueprint actually separates our standards and our assessments in bands 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. This aligns with the shift in the Arizona standards from learning to read to reading to learn. The resources and rubrics, the performance level descriptors, all of those items are in grade spans 3 through 5 and then 6 through 8. I also did an analysis of the released test questions from 2019. And this was interesting. This was a stark difference, and we expected to see this. In 5th grade, the informational text was about what you can learn at the zoo. It was 2 pages of text, that particular item, and 12 paragraphs. There was no technical vocabulary, and the DOK question level was level 2. The 6th grade informational release text question was about deep space observation and the Hubble telescope. There were 14 paragraphs of text that covered 4 pages in length. These included highly technical vocabulary and questions at DOK levels 2 and 3. While the scaled scores may compensate for increased expectations by grade level, we're actually measuring different skill sets beginning in the 6th grade. What also happens as we're measuring persistence, critical thinking, and background knowledge. I guarantee 5th graders have background knowledge about the zoo, and 12-year-olds in 6th grades don't have a lot of knowledge about deep space exploration and measuring. It becomes more difficult for students to show growth or to demonstrate proficiency at the middle school level. These charts clearly demonstrate that. We see lack of growth beginning in 5th grade. 90% of the K-8 letter grade for students is based on the one assessment, and 50% of that is growth. This advantages schools that go through 5th or 6th grade and disadvantages our middle schools. Based on this data and the perspectives shared by Mrs. Mulligan, I would request that the board consider a separate model for middle schools that would at least more accurately reflect the quality of the school and allow us to compare ourselves and see how we're really doing. Thank you very much, and I apologize for taking more than 3 minutes.
Next up, we have Robert Carlisle, followed by Emily New.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. I'm Robert Carlisle. I'm the Director of Research for Mesa Public Schools. And I'd like to advocate for something a little bit small in the CCRI calculation. For getting the bonus point in CCRI, it is based on schools earning or increasing prior year secondary and military enrollment, or having that be at 85%. This calculation hurts many of the schools in my district because many of the students in my district directly after high school go on to religious missions and therefore cannot be factored into this calculation. There's already a precedent for having religious mission factor into things that help a school in the CTE realm. They can receive priority funding through the state block grant for students who go on to religious missions after high school. Having myself served a religious mission after high school, I can tell you that that is one of the things that has allowed me to be very successful in my career because of the skills and things that I learned while serving my religious mission. So I would recommend and ask that the board include this as a way of schools earning that bonus point. So I would like that to be that schools can earn that if the student goes on to post-secondary enrollment, enrolls in the military, or is serving a religious mission. Thank you.
Emily New, followed by Elizabeth Cole. Good morning, board members and President Narducci. My name is Emily New. I'm the high school principal for Salt River High School on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We serve the Otham and Peeposh tribes, and I'm here today to address our school letter grade, which is calculated as an F, and also to tell you the wonderful things our students are doing in Salt River. We have various programs that benefit our students, namely our military leadership program, our band program, our art classes, and we have a strong language and culture program. And this language and culture program meets the needs of our students in developing their language skills in their indigenous language and heritage. Students are able to develop a sense of who they are and where they came from. It teaches them respect of life and respect of all people and cultures. We also have a strong athletic program. Our students are very competitive in volleyball, basketball, and football, etc. Our volleyball girls, you may have seen them on the news recently. They experienced some racism at a different school. And our Salt River girls left the court with dignity and respect, and not engaging in name-calling or taunting. So these programs have taught our students leadership, character building, and are vital to our community. And despite all of these wonderful things happening at Salt River, we have been labeled an F school. But we are not an F school. Our students are not F students, and our teachers and staff are not F people. Do I believe in accountability? I sure do. But there's got to be a better way to measure a school's progress and success. Right now, it's a numbers game and teaching students how to perform well on state testing. Do our academics need to improve? Yes, they do. And we are working toward that goal. We're partnering with WestEd. We have implemented intervention programs. We are maximizing instructional time. We are improving teaching and learning day by day. Last year, in December 18, we received a consent agreement stating we needed to have our school turned around by April of 2019. Thank you for your time. Elizabeth Cole, followed by Ricardo Duran.
Good morning. President Narducci, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, and esteemed members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Cole, and I am here to support the statement of the Arizona Alternative Education Consortium. I'm incoming chair of the Opportunities for Youth Leadership Council and co-chair of the Educational Momentum Task Force. I serve in those capacities with 19 years of workforce development and adult education experience. What is Opportunities for Youth? It's an initiative of Arizona State University to engage 16 to 24-year-old students that are out of work in school. In 2015, the city of Phoenix and the surrounding metropolitan area were identified with one of the highest rates of opportunity youth in our country. The collective impact work that we do is critical in supporting disconnected youth to connect with pathways pertinent to their career and educational goals. Many of those pathways for opportunity youth include community colleges and trade schools. Additionally, workforce development is a critical component of the community college system in Arizona. Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA funding, supports community college programs that connect to designated labor market sectors. The community college system works tirelessly to ensure the success of all students at an affordable cost. Through workforce programs and wraparound support services, opportunity youth have a chance to succeed in our communities. I encourage inclusion in the indicator, and thank you for your time.
Ricardo Duran, followed by Alyssa K. Lemons.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So I am Ricky Duran. I am the Data and Marketing Specialist for Opportunities for Youth. I am also a master's candidate for Public Policy and Data Sciences, and I am a non-traditional first-generation college student. I'm here in support of the Arizona Alternative Education Consortium, and that is because the support and in-class one-on-one attention that I got helped me to gain a better grasp on the fundamental materials to continue my education into ASU. The credits I received were applied to my bachelor's in science and prepared me to receive an above-average score on the GRE, a score that got me into graduate school, in a graduate school program that I currently hold a 4.0 GPA in, as well as working full-time. If my decision to attend community college made me underprepared for college or career, there may be a discussion to be had on that topic. One thing that I have learned is that every young person is an individual, and one traditional program is not perfect fit for everyone. We in the OFY network are here to remove the barriers for these youth, to ensure that they are supported in the pursuit of a career that they can be, one, passionate about and successful because of that passion. In hopes, we hope that reduces disconnection and dependency on support services for this population, whether it be trade certification, a 2-year professional associate's, 4-year degree, or even further like me. Thank you.
Alyssa K. Lemons, followed by Patricia Christie.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I want to affirm the comments that will follow about our school and add my perspective as a parent and community member. I feel equally able to stand at this podium with the people who have spoken before about the F grade. I've been a professional volunteer for 11 years in the public education as a classroom volunteer, a parent group president. I sat on various task force groups with the district and been employed as both an instructional and non-instructional aide. I have willingly served in a variety of capacities to support public education in my neighborhood. When Rhodes Junior High was given the F designation last year, it was a crushing blow to our faculty in our neighborhood. Longtime residents near the school expressed their disdain over the perceived impact of property values, their perceived failure of the principal and staff, which was really, really unfortunate. Parents whose kids who matriculate to Rhodes pulled me aside at parks and at school events to say, hey, are you sending your kid to that school? Elementary friendships were divided, and parents decided to get into other drop-off lanes. The faculty was crushed as they implemented a new 21st century model for teaching and learning. What the F means to our school is fierce, forerunner, and fearless. This is also what a group of dedicated team teaching faculty needs to hear from you. To people who want to innovate,
the learning process so that students could get a differentiated learning space that actually mattered, in a commitment to stop running students through a one-size-fits-all daily schedule. We have received an F for a second time, although the reviewers who come to our school cannot tell us what more we must do to conquer the mathematical matrix of computations that confine us. I sit in those meetings and I watch those teachers and I watch their faces drop and I watch them think, what am I doing wrong and where is my commitment? And it makes me very, very frustrated. We cannot equally teach the test and teach to the heart. In your matrix, there is no reward for teaching to the heart. There is no recognition. There are no points, no acknowledgement. The faculty bearing an incredible weight under the professional pressure that comes with this designation. Your grade is a reputational nightmare for staff. I invite you to think carefully about how you can be rewarding innovation and allowing space for it. How the system that is devised is incompatible with innovation and problem solving the critical problems in education today. And how we are absolutely slaying the souls of bright, energetic teaching professionals as we give space to renovate education. Every time we have to address the F, we are taking time from learning and innovation and moving forward as we move into a 21st century. I'd like to buy a vowel. I'd like to buy an I. And I'd like to place it directly in front of our F so that it reads if. Because if is about possibilities and future outcomes and for giving space to change and innovation. We have hope for our community at our school and our education system on a national level. Will you join us as we fearlessly pursue the if? Thank you.
Patricia Christie, followed by Andy Forless.
Good morning, Superintendent Hoffman and the esteemed board members. I'm the proud principal of F School, Rhodes Junior High School. We're an innovative school. We actually are breaking apart current systems in education and trying to make it not the archaic place that it used to be. We have no bells. We have 5 teams of teachers that wrap around our students and offer personalized learning for them. The cool part about that is that schedules are built by teachers day by day, depending on the needs of our students. And ultimately, the students participate in picking those schedules. We are teaching them agency, motivation, advocacy, things that we need to make sure that our students have when they graduate from high school and college and enter our community. My problem is that there's a lack of alignment between AZ Merit and the accountability system and having those skills. I think we need to think broader about what accountability looks like in schools. We are stifling innovation by putting one part of one accountability system in place for our schools. We need to be thinking about education differently. I hear it all of the time. And if we insist on keeping the accountability system the way that it is, no school will move forward. I am all in favor of accountability. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think it should be so narrow. We really need to be thinking about how we create an accountability system that offers academic sides and social emotional sides to the learning of our students. I propose that Rhodes be moved out of the current accountability system and pilot a program of what new accountability could look like. I know you all care about kids. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. And I really think that we collectively need to be thinking about how we're educating our students. And I ask you to join me in this venture. We are an F. I'm proud of my school. And the only thing that F does is it shames my teachers, it shames my students and my community. I would like for you to consider looking at education differently with me, and I will join you in such a pilot. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Andy Forless.
Good morning, Superintendent Hoffman on the phone and esteemed board members. I am Andy Forless, the very proud Deputy Superintendent of Mesa Public Schools. As the largest school district in Arizona, we have the honor of serving over 62,000 children, 10,000 employees, and over 80 schools. We have a long history of success as measured by many data points. On today's agenda, you will have an opportunity to vote on the A through F Appeals Committee recommendations. In the list of schools, you will see 4 of ours from Mesa. These are 4 very unique schools serving unique communities with learning models aligned to meet the needs of these very unique children. We appreciate the opportunity to tell the stories of these schools and why the current A through F accountability model does not fully represent the successes that are contributing to those 4 communities. As you know, school districts are systems of schools that consist of people and processes working toward a desired outcome, jointly owned by a group of schools, students, parents, and the surrounding community. At Mesa Public Schools, we have embarked on a strategic planning process that began with designing a portrait of a graduate. Through this process, we have learned from thousands, including community members, business community, and families. They want us to be accountable to far more than standardized assessments. They want their children to be ready for the future of work. This means they want their children to be ethical, to be inclusive, and to be resilient. They want them to learn how to collaborate, to communicate, contribute to their community, think creatively, innovate and think and problem solve. All of that requires us to take incredible risks and innovating in a space that we have traditionally called school. These Mesa schools that appealed their letter grades are doing this, and they are doing it very well. Built on the foundation of Arizona academic standards, they are achieving outcomes that are not currently measured in the A through F accountability system. I had the pleasure of being at a school that had an F school that you've heard about today. There was a focus group of 7th and 8th graders. They were asked to use one hand to indicate the number of caring adults that support them at their school. The minimum number was 2. The majority of the students said, "Why do I only have to use one hand?" That's a metric of accountability. It is our hope that future state accountability systems will embrace more comprehensive and community-based accountability measures so that the greater rating truly reflects the impact the schools have on their students and, most importantly, the whole community. We would gladly participate in conversations to explore the work that other states are doing to boldly lead the development of community-based accountability systems. Thank you very much for your time.
President Arducci, members of the board, that concludes the request to speak.
Thank you, and thanks for all the input and the comments. We will move on to our general session. Director Williams.
President Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5A is a presentation, discussion, and approval of the fiscal year 2020 School Safety Program Grant Awards. Callie Koslick from the Department of Education will be providing a presentation.
All right. Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, board members. It's a pleasure to be here before you again this morning, and the department is pleased to make its recommendations for the school safety grant program. First of all, I just want to thank all of the teams at ADE who supported this process. A lot of time and hard, smart work went into this, and I'm just very grateful for all the collaboration across our departments and areas of expertise. I also want to thank ADOA, the governor's office, and stakeholders who were involved in this process. And I believe before you have materials that include the names of the recommended awardees and more details on the rubric, but I will walk through the process. Let's see here. Okay, so first of all, I just want to start by explaining the goals and approach behind how we approach this work. These are the guiding standards we use for designing the rubric that determined our awardee recommendations. We know that all schools across the state of Arizona have needs, and it was our intent to create a spread across the state using a fair and transparent process. We wanted to maintain fidelity to the statute, the state board approved plan in August, and information that we had publicly shared with the field about the grant process. It was our intent all along to use data to really drive our decision making and approach. This slide right here is an overview of our applicant data that we got once the grant application was released and we received those applications within the designated time frame. We had over 900 schools apply for positions. The statute allows for schools to submit budget requests based on local salary schedules, and you can see in that bottom table these are the averages for those salaries. By statute, schools can apply for more than one position, but we ask schools to rank their first choice. Based on the demand, we focused in on data for that first choice, and this table kind of lays out what that data looks like or breaks down to. From the total demand, you can see there is over a $40 million differential on funds available from what was requested from schools' first choice. But from that data, we looked at how the percent of funds requested broke down, what that equates to out of the 32 million available funds, and then designated the number of positions for award allocation across the three resources. It broke down to roughly a third for each resource, or 70% for school counselors and social workers and 30% for SROs. So now on to the rubric. From that data, from there we created a rubric based on the broader framework released in September. From the plan approved in September, we had said that we would need to use a rubric in a situation where there are more positions requested than funds available. And to fast track the process and get the funds out as soon as possible, we had received a waiver from ADOA to move from a traditional competitive grant model that uses a peer review process to instead use objective, statewide, school-level data sets. Our rubric has 3 tiers. The first one was the same for all the applicants, as you can see here. We considered whether the application was complete, including information that was necessary for the rubric. We looked at ratios of position for which a school was applying relative to school size. If a school site classified as rural, it automatically passed to Tier 2. There were 88 rural school applications total out of the whole bunch, so we didn't want to have rural schools be disadvantaged in this process. And we also kind of moved to the next tier, existing sites with no other SRO resources or the sites that were renewing their existing resource. So schools that pass through that first tier onto Tier 2, we then use separate criteria for SROs and school counselors and social workers. And the applications were considered against schools applying for the same position. And at this point, we were using a point-based method in order to assign schools points based on these criterias. For SROs, we awarded points to current program grantees that have shown fidelity and commitment to the program requirements, including their participation in trainings and law-related education. We awarded points to SROs not currently on the program that do not have an existing resource at their school site in order to provide fairness on that end for new schools applying. We looked at the percentage of homeless students at the school, since this is a vulnerable population attending schools across the state. Schools also got a point for filling out their annual firearm incident survey, which is a federal requirement of all schools. This is the only annual school-level data set on crime statistics that ADE collects. So that was one of the reasons that we used that particular data set. And we also considered a school's level of chronic absenteeism, dropout rates, and graduation rates, since these are key indicators for college and career readiness. The category used for each school depends on the grade span. If there are overlapping grade spans in a school and more than one data set required of that school for reporting, we took the highest number. On the school counselor and social work side, we use some similar criteria, including homelessness. For school counselors and social workers, we also looked at targeted support and improvement, also known as TSI. This is a federal accountability designation for schools, with subgroups performing in the bottom 5% across the state. There are actually over 800 schools in Arizona classified as TSI, so we knew that would help create a spread across the state as well. And then we use the similar impact data as we did on the SRO side. And then finally, moving on to Tier 3 here, applicants were ranked based on the points earned in Tier 2. And as needed, additional measures applied to the rank order. This was essentially our tiebreaker in some situations. For the SROs, Tier 3 was actually not needed based on the funds available. In other words, when we set a cut based on the number of points earned, the SRO schools fell cleanly into cuts. For school counselors and social workers, we had to use a few more data sets to break the ties, including whether schools had applied to cost share or apply as a consortium to share a resource. We looked at poverty indicators, including free and reduced price lunch eligibility. And for social workers only, because we needed an additional cut there, we also looked at whether a school had a high number of emergency certified teachers. See. I'm losing my mouse here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so for the final count, this essentially mirrors our original table, and you can see how those percentage breaks down. The data from the applicant pool and the dollar amount requested drove our allocation distribution. This next slide here shows a little more in depth what that looked like for each of the positions. You can see that there is a spread of resources across counties. Awards went to all different types of schools in Arizona. We did maintain many of the existing SRO sites through this rubric. And the turnover, looking at some historical data, the turnover represents the average rate of turnover we've seen from cohort to cohort in the past. So essentially, as we've been speaking about the whole time, this new funding, the new $20 million that was added to the existing $12 million for the state school safety program, through this process, we are building a new 3-year cohort. And as funds become available, we will use the same process and criteria unless there are new funds and conditions passed by the legislature. Essentially, it would cost an additional $42 million to fund all the first choice positions. And unfortunately, there were 501 schools that did not receive a position through this grant cycle. An important piece to all of this work and to the future of the school safety grant program is to be focused on building a pipeline of qualified personnel for these newly funded positions across the state. ADE has used social media and its communications platforms to encourage people to apply. Stakeholders have also been helpful partners in spreading the word to their memberships and constituency bases. And we use social media to help clarify criteria for certification and really encourage people to get involved and apply for positions that there is additional funding for. By August 2020, we will have a clearer picture of the pipelines to fill immediate needs in the state, and I think that will help for future policymaking purposes as well. And lastly, I just wanted to note kind of the vision for the school safety program after going through the process and seeing the data that has come in from this process over the last several months. I think it has shown that there's a fundamental need across the state, and ADE will support more funding for this program. We will continue to provide information on other sources of funding that schools have available, or at least are eligible sources of funding that could potentially go to these needed resources. And we will also work to identify additional federal grants for the state. And we'll continue to pay close attention to pipeline issues as well.
Thank you very much. Nice presentation. Well done. Questions from the board members? On the phone?
President.
Oh, Cal.
No question. No question. I just want to go back to where we started. And originally, we talked about just handing this out based on prior applications. And I know it was we said we want it done different to give everybody a shot at it. I know there wasn't near enough money to go around, but I want to thank you and the rest of the staff at ADE for going through this very difficult process and at least coming up with a system that was based on data and a clear rubric. And not everybody's getting what they want, but it's a whole lot better than where we started.
Thank you.
When we first broached this topic, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
President Narducci.
President Narducci?
Oh, yes. Armando.
Yeah, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, I'm satisfied that the program and distribution of the funds, I think was adequate. We were one of the schools that applied. We didn't get selected, but I feel like it was fair, and it addresses the problem, and I'm satisfied. I'm happy the governor stepped in on the Wilson School District issue, but not everybody gets funded, and that's okay. That's the way there's not enough money, but I think it's a fair process.
Thank you.
And I would just add, too, there will be public files available on our website for more information on the scoring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to... Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you, President Narducci and members. I also wanted to thank all of the teams at ADE who spent so much time and energy working on this. So to specifically call out some of the hardworking teams. Thank you to the school safety and social wellness team, our policy team, communications team, accountability team. I appreciate our partnerships with ADOA and the governor's office, and also all of the groups that came to ADE to give us feedback in the rubric and were very open and honest with us so we could have conversations around what types of data to use to make sure that this process was as fair and equitable, to make sure that all types of schools across the state had access to these funds. And I feel very proud of the rubric. And I know that we still have a ways to go since we still have over 500 schools in need. And but I think this is a huge step in the right direction, and I look forward to continuing to partner with everyone to find additional funds and additional means to provide additional school safety positions in fiscal 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. We all agree with you. And just, I think, from a simple standpoint, more money, more allocation. So move on for a motion, or do you want more? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have a few. I'll move on with a motion in this regard. First off, members Kay and Welburn are abstaining due to conflicts.
On the SRO list.
On the SRO, sorry, I have to start with what's at the top. On the SRO list, both members Kay and member Welburn are abstaining due to conflicts. Do I have a motion to approve the SRO list as presented with the modification to add Wilson Elementary School from the Wilson Elementary District to the list due to additional funding becoming available and due to Wilson Elementary serving a community with a high homicide rate?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second.
Second.
Jill's a second. Thanks, Armando. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to the counselor list. Members Kay and Baker are abstaining due to conflicts. Do I have a motion to approve the school counselor list as presented? Joe moves. Do I have a second? I have a second from Christine. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Member Welborn, I need a I didn't hear your vote.
I have to abstain from both of them.
Not the school counselors.
Yeah, because one of the schools is applying for a counselor and one's applying for SRO. I have 2 schools on the list.
Do we have a quorum since she abstained?
President Narducci, Member Wilborn, just let staff check really quick because we had you down as social worker and SRO, not school counselor. So let's just double check that real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So that's correct. So I thought that meant that I had to abstain from all voting, but you're saying I can vote on one of them?
Yes, you can vote on counselors.
You're not getting a counselor.
Yeah.
Okay, I looped up, I put those together. So I will vote yay.
Okay. Thank you. Now you can abstain.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not following directions here.
We'll move on to the social worker list. Members Kay and Welborn are abstaining due to conflicts. And do I have a conflict to approve the school social worker list as presented?
Give a motion. I will motion. Yeah.
Okay, what did I say?
Conflict. Conflict.
Do I have a motion to approve the school social worker list as presented?
I'll do that again.
Okay, thank you. Jill's got it, and a second. Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 5B regarding discussion and possible action on the ADAF. Director Williams.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5B is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the 2018-2019 ATHREF accountability appeals. I believe that was Member Mack who just joined us.
No, this is Superintendent Hoffman.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Superintendent. So, the Appeals Committee met on December 9th and December 10th to prepare these recommendations for the State Board of Education. Board members who are on the Appeals Committee of the State Board include Member Burton, Member Kay, and Member Broussard. In your materials, you have a list of the Appeals Committee's recommendations for the ATHREF accountability appeals. Those appeals are numbered, and that's important for the board and the public to know that those appeals are numbered because we will have to pull some appeals off of the motion due to member conflicts. With that, if any board members have any questions in regard to the appeal committee recommendations, please let staff know.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. Thank you for all the time that was put in. I had been on the appeals committee before. It was very brief. This one was not brief, so I believe it was 2 days long. So I thank you for all your volunteer time on this. Appreciate it very much. Is there, Member Kay?
Also just make a comment, want to publicly thank board staff and the department accountability team for all of the work. There was a tremendous amount of work that went into preparing the material, sorting through the way it was organized and presented, and we stayed on track was just top-notch. So thank you for all your work on this.
President Narducci.
Yeah, Member Wilburn.
Members of the board, we had a new policy this year that was in effect with regard to D schools and whether they should remain D schools or move on to be an F school. So my question is there anything, any learnings to be had with regard to that policy on schools that other than schools that remained a D and were able to show growth versus others that did not? I'm asking members of the appeals committee. Sorry.
Okay, that's what I thought. Members of the appeals committee.
President Narducci,
Member Burton.
board, I think what most important message to schools in that situation is provide evidence and lots of data about what you're doing. We can't, as much as sometimes we want to, we can't just randomly make a decision because you made a good case if you didn't provide supporting evidence.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Anybody on the phone? All right, so As Director Williams mentioned, the appeals were numbered in order for us to proceed with our voting, and we'll take some of the appeals separately due to member conflicts. Appeal numbers being pulled for a separate vote are 26, 56, 83, 95, 2, and 59. Is that correct?
That is correct, President Narducci.
Thank you. Then I'll move on with a motion. And do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the Appeals Committee for the 2018-2019 A to F appeals as presented, excluding in this vote appeal numbers 26, 56, 83, 95, 2, and 59?
So moved.
The motion from Cal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Christine. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now we'll move on. Member K will be abstaining from appeal numbers 26, 56, 83, and 95. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the Appeals Committee for the 2018-2019 A to F appeals as presented for 26, 56, 83, and 95?
So moved.
So moved by Cal, seconded?
Second.
Second by Member Welborn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Member Ruiz will be abstaining from appeal numbers 2 and 59, correct, Member Ruiz?
Correct.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the Appeals Committee for the 2018-2019 A to F appeals as presented for 2 and 59?
So moved.
Motion by Member Kay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Welborn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5C. Director Williams.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5C is a presentation and discussion. This is information only regarding the research and auditing conducted by the Department of Education and Wendy Davies' team on the A through F Accountability College and Career Readiness Index for both traditional 912 schools and alternative schools. This was something that the board had asked for, and we're delivering it. So, again, just information only. Please let us know what you think of it, and Wendy Davey will be presenting.
Great. Thank you.
Just want to make sure it's working. Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and board members. It is our pleasure to stand up today and share the information and the audit process for the CCRI, not just for the traditional, but the alternative. As you're aware, we just passed our third year for the traditional, our first year for alternative. We've been doing audits for 2 years, so we'll be sharing some of that information. In addition, we built a platform to collect more data, so this presentation also provides some information on the additional data we've collected. I would be remiss if I don't take a second and acknowledge behind me two of my members, Shannon Etz and Caitlin Drake. They're not going to stand up, but they're going to wave. There they go. Most of the presentation materials you are seeing and a lot of the information they actually calculated, and if I forget something, they're more than willing to help me. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And just with a general summary. So we started the audit process last year when we were just the traditionals. And what we were doing is we randomly selected schools and we brought them in. After the first year, we did have 2 schools that were unable to produce matching or information on what they submitted. So those 2 schools were put into a 2-year mandatory audit process. We are happy to say that they both passed this year, and they will remain on for one more year, at which time they should come off. We were also able to take the submitted spreadsheets, and we were able to do additional analysis on those. So that's just sort of an overall general summary of what we're doing with the audits. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a little bit more information on the audit itself. So schools are randomly selected unless you're mandatorily put in for a finding during the appeal or some other reason. So we include those schools as well. We will notify those schools that they have been selected for an audit and they have to produce their spreadsheet. From producing the spreadsheet, AD is able to check the ID numbers, the counts, and things like that. We also check some of the components that we have the data to check for reasonability. We follow up with any schools if we have any questions, and then working and signing off, we send out notifications to the schools. I'm also prepared to share a little bit about what we're looking for fiscal year 20 to continue this process. It was nice that we got the alternative school the first year with all those additional components, because we'll really be able to watch them mature and see how those CCR items are coming in. So for fiscal year 20, we'll have a little bit of a busy audit year for alternatives, as you saw in the appeals. We also are looking at bringing in credits earned and on track for graduation in the alternative model. If you remember, those two are self-reported as well. So we're going to be doing a very nice high-level check, but then this will be the first year that ADE is going to go out and actually do in-person audits. Short of my department going away, we're perfectly staffed to do so. We'll be following sort of the procedure that we do for the alternative school applications. So if you've ever talked to anybody who we've come out and visited, it's just a whole lot of data, a whole lot of checking and balances, and we're planning on doing 2 of the on credits, or towards credits to graduates, credits earned, and 1 CCRI for a high school traditional and 1 CCRI for the alternative school. So that is our plan for fiscal year 20. So I'm going to go ahead and make a transition from the audit process to the additional data that we're actually being able to collect this year. So when the schools went into a platform the first 2 years, they only submitted like 2 numbers. Okay, so this year we built it out to get a student count at each component. So this graphic you're looking at here is the traditional graphic, and in a minute I'm going to be sharing the alternative. So if you look on the left side, you can see that we had 50 schools that were ineligible for the CCRI points. That means they didn't have the end count. We had 303 schools that were eligible that submitted information, and 152 of them earned the bonus points. The average on the CCRI out of 20 points is a 16.8, and it ranges from a 0.4 to the 22. Remember, it's 20, but you can earn 2 bonus points. That's the account for the 22. Student counts varied from the small end count of 10 all the way up to 917 seniors, or your 12th grade class. In that, we actually accounted for 65,237 students, and if you remember, most grade levels are somewhere between 83, 85,000, so we're capturing quite a few students. The next slide provides some interesting data, because the questions always come out. When the ad hoc built this 3 years ago, they wanted to put in components where everybody had a chance to earn points. So what we wanted to see, is there anything we should drop off? Is there anything not being used? And what is being used? And what we found out for the traditional is everything is being used. So if you look on the left side, this is by students. So out of that 65,000 students, we looked at individual students counts. 64% of that 65,000 kids are earning points for ABOR. CTE, FAFSA, we can go down. On the bottom 5, this is where the least amount of points are coming from. And so Cambridge, but that's a very select group, but they're getting their points there. So for those schools, that's actually very important to have that on there. And then you can go down. On the right side is where schools are getting their points. So for you to count in these numbers, at least 1 student at your school would have to get a point. So you can see there, AZ Merit. So at least 98% of their schools are getting at least 1 or 2 kids to get that higher score, that passing rate on English 3, or English 11, sorry, and Algebra 2. So that's the same thing on the side by schools. And then the bottom 5%, or the bottom 5, as you can see, is the same kind of things on this left side. So it's actually quite a telling infographic. Thank you, Shannon. And I'm going to move to the next one. Now we're going to switch over to the alternative model, because this is where things get a little different. I want to keep in mind that the alternative model includes everything in the traditional model with things that are very specific to alternative students. So when we get into some detail, you're going to see slight differences because the kids are different. So we had 23 ineligible schools. So that meant they did not meet the N count, just like on the traditional. We had 125 eligible schools and 3 schools that did not submit. Again, there's 35 available points for this point, and it ranged from 0 to the 35. The student count went from 10 to 914, and we captured 7,533. So take the 65 plus the 7, we're now into the 70,000 capturing those kids in the state. So here's what it looks differently for the alternative schools. So you look at the top 5 where they're getting points: the second language students, career readiness, workplace readiness, and we'd have to go into the details of the actual rubric to actually go more into what this means, work study. And then you look at, for the schools, it's very similar. Again, the AZ Merit is up there on the partially proficient. And then you've got the Grand Canyon Diploma and the IB and items below, where is usually not indicative of our alternative schools, but there is chance for them to earn points. So I'm going to check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. So that is where we're at with the audit. That is where we are at collecting data on the CCRI audit, because as you know, this is not traditional, the state accountability systems. It's very unique. So we are actually pleased with the data we're collecting and the audit process we have in place, showing that schools appear to be performing with good fidelity on the information they're turning in of what we've used so far. And I stand for any questions you have.
Cal.
I just want to thank you for this. This is great data. And, you know, having been in on the original creation of this, there was so much angst about self-reported data and angst about how difficult the audits would be, but you're taking care of it. And I believe so strongly in self-reported data, because we heard testimony earlier this morning, people saying, I don't understand how I got the grade. Self-reported data, you do it yourself, you see it. And these are again, I'm sure we need to do some tweaking and adjusting based on the information you're getting here. But these are things that every school's got control over. They can pick and choose from the menu. They can make stuff happen. And they're in control. They're not a victim of the process. So to you and your staff, thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy. We'll move on. Let me ask. Does anybody need a break right now? Okay, we are going to take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at, 11:45. Thank you. Ready? All right, we're going to take up where we left off. We have our members Hoffman and member Ruiz on the phone, and everybody at the table. We're going to move on to item 5D, and Director Williams will provide us some information.
President Arducci, can we just clarify that Member Ruiz and Superintendent Hoffman are still on the line?
I'm here too.
They're both still on the line. So President Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, item 5D is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the 1920 and 2021 accountability system. The only action that the board staff is asking for today from the board is to direct us to do work and to send this out for a survey for the field. We will talk about alternative schools, and we'll just discuss some things. The alternative ATAC is recommending changing for alternative schools. We will discuss the K-8 traditional model, looking specifically at the acceleration readiness bucket for that 8th grade math assessment. We'll be looking at the 9-12 traditional model for the 9-12 growth indicator. And then for the K-8 and 9-12 systems, we'll be looking at the special education bonus points. Wendy and I will be presenting this together because we're a good team. Okay. So the first topic we're going to discuss is a special education bonus point. This was brought forth by a member of the board to look at lowering the threshold for receiving the special education bonus point. Currently, that is at 80% of the state average. As the state average continues to rise since the 16-17 school year, the school's percentage of special education students also needs to rise. So we were asked to look at 60%, lowering that threshold from 80 to 60% of the state average. This would allow for specifically schools that have a pretty set population to access those bonus points because they're not able to continue to increase their special education. You don't have many students moving into the district. And if that board member wants to jump in at any point, he can. So when the department and the ATAC, I don't know why this is not. I think this mouse is dead. Can you? There we go. So the ATAC look at the special education bonus for both the K-8 and 9-12. In the existing system, which is at 80% of the threshold, 68% of schools receive that special education bonus. If you were to move down to the 60% of the statewide average, 84% of schools would receive those bonus points. The ATAC also looked at a staggered SPED bonus point. So the green in that last one, schools earning 2 points, schools earning 1.5 points, and schools earning 1 point. And that's the staggered numbers would be for 60, 70, and 80. If the board would like to, I would love to have a little bit of a discussion on what you think of moving the special education bonus threshold down to 60 or a potential staggered option.
Member Kay.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members. I have a question around, I wasn't here at the time of the ad hoc committee when we were putting together the model, and so I guess my question starts with, what was the rationale behind the bonus points to begin with?
I can help you.
Cal.
I can help with that. The hard, cold reality of school funding and financing is that we do not receive enough money for special ed students to actually cover the cost of educating them. So schools that have just an average special ed program must take money away from their regular ed program in order to subsidize the special ed program. So the intent of this was to recognize that and to acknowledge that schools who, for whatever reason, manage to avoid the responsibility of educating special education students have significant additional resources for their regular ed program, because they don't have to pull any money out of that to subsidize the special ed. So they should be able to perform higher. So if you are doing what is responsible and you are taking care of the special ed population, then you deserve bonus points for that.
Okay, thank you.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board, I just want to call attention to how we set the benchmark for this particular item, assuming that the logic is sound, that we are trying to provide bonus for those schools, to take on more of the weight, the burden of educating special ed students. And so the benchmark we've used for this is sort of the statewide average of how many kids require this extra education. And we understand that that number is increasing. But we also understand in my conversations with staff that it's not equally distributed across the state, and that there are certain locales that have a higher percentage of special ed students and others that have a lower percent. And one example of this might be a rural district, for example, that is quote unquote disadvantaged to earn these points in this category because they just don't have, if the statewide average is 12% special ed, that community doesn't have 12%. They may only have 5%. So I'm understanding from staff that the distribution of those students is not equal or equivalent across the state. So to use a statewide average may not be the most fair way to apply this rule, and especially when we consider lowering the bar, because if you consider lowering the bar, again, those schools that are doing a good job by taking on a higher proportion of special ed students now don't have to do as much. So it's a disincentive, and that you'd actually see students that, or you might see schools that, this is the unintended consequence, you might see schools that say, well, we don't have to serve as many kids now because they've lowered the bar. So as we look at this particular item, I'd like staff to consider, are there other ways to set that benchmark to, yes, recognize that certain schools are disadvantaged in meeting the bar, and rather than lowering the bar to 60% and lowering it for everybody, is there another way to do it?
Thank you. Member Kay.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members. So when we discussed this last month, I had made a request for more information because I agree that maybe there's another way to look at this. In particular, if we're talking about rural schools, what does the rural state average look like? I don't know that we have that information, because are we talking about an individual school or two, or is there a pattern or a trend that we can see? So I don't know what the status of that request is, but I think it would be absolutely valuable in trying to make this decision. And then I think I'd mentioned at the last meeting as well, if we're going to, and it may end up defeating the purpose, however, if we're going to look at lowering the percentage, then I think we should engage in a discussion about increasing the potential possible points for schools that are serving populations that are at or above the state average.
Right.
Because you talk about resources being allocated to students and taking, from your general fund for that it's a real issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Rich.
Member Baker.
Yeah, President Naducci, members of the board. We picked the state average, but actually a percentage of the state average, not the full state average.
Right.
And that number was admittedly picked somewhat arbitrarily. And now we have data, okay? And I have not studied the data near as much as I'm sure the ADU staff have, but I just know anecdotally the issue is rural communities. In a suburban community like Phoenix or Tucson, kids flow back and forth, but and schools can figure out ways to avoid dealing with special ed kids or not. But in a isolated rural community, they take all comers. And anecdotally, I learned of a number of schools that missed it by just 1 or 2 students.
Because of their size.
And that because it's a 2-point bonus, that made the difference of a grade for those schools. The thinking was to err, if we're going to err on the side of being fair to those schools. And the other piece of this is I would suggest that we go to that tiered system so that there's not such a severe drop-off from 1 or 2 students being in or being out. The other thing I want to just note, just to acknowledge and put on the table, that this is a really tricky issue because the last thing we ever want to do is incentivize school systems to identify special ed kids. So we never want to have a school saying, well, we need to identify 1 or 2 more kids and then we'll get a better grade. So the target for me is to identify those schools who are very, very clearly avoiding the responsibility of educating special ed students and to give the other schools points.
This is Superintendent Hoffman.
Superintendent Hoffman, pleased to hear from you.
Thank you, President Narducci and members. I really appreciate the comments, and I'm always in favor of looking to see, are we using the best data to make these decisions? So I am fully in support in making sure we're pulling the best data that we have available in terms of special education populations across the state. I agree with Member Baker's recent comments about making sure we are also not incentivizing an overdiagnosis of students. We want to make sure that we're also we want to also incentivize that students can graduate from special education when appropriate. So I think that's a really important point to be made. And then also in terms of rural communities, I've seen it both ways, where I've seen where a rural school may only have 1 student in special education, and that can, of course, be a strain on the school since it's really hard to hire the special education teachers and service providers in rural communities for few students. But then I've also seen on the other end where in some communities there's actually much higher numbers of students that need services for various reasons. And so I just want to make sure we're not making assumptions that just because a community is rural that they might have lower numbers when sometimes they in fact have higher numbers. So again, just want to make sure we're using the best data possible to make these decisions. And I would say at this point, with the information I have, I also like the idea of having a more staggered, tiered system so that we're not having a strong incentive for students to be in special ed when they don't need to be in special ed, but then also offering that incentive for schools to have additional resources when they are serving a higher special education population. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Member Kay.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members. So for me, I think we have access to the additional information. I would just like to see it so that we can analyze it and determine whether the staggered model makes sense. And, you know, I think the unintended consequences issue can go both ways. And in some ways, where we started, which is the financial concern, is the balancing act in terms of over-identification schools have to struggle with. Those additional resources are not for free. And it's especially in rural communities, having worked with plenty of schools in rural communities, extremely hard sometimes to find the appropriate services, having to pay for the commute from, you know, hundreds of miles away because you don't have that specialist in that community. So those are real factors, I think, that are all playing in. So the best thing I think we could do is look at the data. Thank you.
Thank you. So with those comments,
President Narducci, we have thank you for that great discussion. We have a lot of follow-ups that we can get to all of you, and we'll share that with ATAC, which some of the members are in the audience.
President Narducci?
yes, Member Ruiz.
Yeah, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members. Yeah, my comments on this would be, if you're going to err on one side, I think what you want to err on is on the side of serving students, not underserving, but maybe overserving. And no system is perfect. And then the other observation or comment I would make is that, what about when you have a high percentage of kids who are EL, and so they're classified as EL students and also special ed? Are we looking at any kind of point system there? What's the impact there?
Thank you, Member Ruiz. Director Williams is taking copious notes.
Thank you.
Director Williams.
Okay, so moving on to, as you know, the acceleration readiness indicator in the K-8 model contains an aspect in which schools can receive 5 available points for the end of course assessment for Algebra 1. With the board's 5-year assessment plan, the EOCs will go away for the spring. So we need to figure out a way to incentivize those students taking those advanced math classes and have schools be able to receive those 5 points. So there's 2 options presented to you today. One is option A, which awards 5 points to schools who increase the percentage of highly proficient, which is performance level 4, on the AZM2 from prior year to current year. Helios and ASU did a study. They looked at 7,000 students who took out the Algebra 1 assessment and also took the 8th grade assessment, and they did just as well and they were highly proficient on the 8th grade assessment. So there is a correlation between the highly proficient with the 8th grade assessment and the Algebra 1 end of course assessment. Option 2 is to award 2.5 points to schools who increase the percentage of highly proficient 8th grade students from prior year to current year, and awards 2.5 points to schools who decrease the percentage of minimally proficient 8th grade math students. I will say option B is a little bit different than how it currently is, just focusing on those advanced math students. But we wanted to ensure that we gave you a few options to have a discussion on and to give some direction to staff.
Thank you.
President Narducci, Director Williams, I just want to ask a question with interpreting this graph. Are we reading in the top line that 85% of schools get points due to the 8th grade acceleration component? Is that how to read that line?
That is correct, Member Wellborn.
85% of schools.
That is correct. The acceleration readiness indicator is a.
So how does, what I'd like to see is more data, because I don't understand how we can have 41, 38, 8% math proficiency scores across the state when you're telling me that 85% of our students are getting a level 4 highly proficient in math.
Maybe Wendy can help clarify with that for me, because there you go.
President Narducci, Member Wellborn, what that is saying is highly proficient in those end-of-course assessments. So these are the 5th through 8th grade students. Actually, there was no 5th grade students, but this is 6th through 8th grade students that were in a high school math course.
Right.
So that is why you would expect them to be qualifying as proficient on those assessments.
And do you have data that shows what percentage of 8th grade students participating in that level of course?
We do.
What, do you know what that is?
Looking at the static file at a state level for 2019, 8th graders, we had 16,732 take Algebra 1. Now, this is not that they took both tests. This is who took a high school assessment. We had 350 take Algebra 2. We had 2,353 take Geometry. In 7th grade, we had 2,385 take Algebra 1. 36 take Algebra 2, and 98 take Geometry. In 6th grade, we had a whole 93 kids take Algebra 1, and 5 kids take Geometry.
We had about 18,000 kids in 8th grade. Is that right?
19,435.
In 8th grade. And out of 80,000 8th graders?
83 to 85,000.
So we're at 20%? Who's good at math?
Good enough.
That is close.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with that.
Okay, so thank you for that data. I think it's helpful. So one of the things I'd like the board to consider in looking at this is the providing points to schools that are looking at the bottom end of this, those that are minimally proficient. So if you look at our statewide scores in math, we're still below grade level. We're the highest point we get is at 41%, and it goes 38% or below. So we still have a large number, more than a majority of our students, that are not quite at grade level. So I'm thinking that it would be good to have a way to reward schools that start addressing this huge challenge of the kids that are partially and minimally proficient in their math, and trying to find a way to provide incentive to them, rather than just rewarding those schools that have the 20% of our student body, 8th graders, for example, in a higher end course, which is a very valuable, worthwhile thing to do, but not to the expense of looking at the bigger issue, which is we have a majority of our 8th graders that are not yet at grade level math.
Baker.
President Narducci, members of the board, I certainly acknowledge the point that you're making. I do want to, though, go back to the intent. The intent here was acknowledgement of the reality that students who accelerate in math tend to do really well in school and in college. And so this was very intentional to incentivize schools to remove barriers and open up doors so that kids were not stuck taking 8th grade math just because the administrator didn't know how to get an Algebra 1 program going. And with the demise of end-of-course testing, we can't do that anymore. But there is, and Wendy can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a very high correlation between students who take the advanced math classes and who score high on this test. So it's not as clean as it was, but we're still incentivizing that forward thrust. That's the primary intent of these points.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I think that I'd just like us to consider expanding the scope of it a little bit around helping the lower half, if you will, try to improve, provide some reward and incentive for schools to improve or reduce the number of kids that are minimally and partially proficient in their math scores is also a valuable endeavor, particularly since we know that 30% of college students take remedial math courses.
Member Baker.
One other issue is I appreciate if staff could, as they're looking at this issue, could also look at the inclusion of some kind of threshold, because obviously there's point of no return in terms of improvement. You can only improve upon improvement, and then you hit a wall. So there should be some point where you reach a level and you're at the level, and so you get the points.
President Narducci, staff took copious amounts of notes on that discussion as well.
Thank you.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members, not to muddy the waters, however, and it's not this particular topic, but during the appeals, it seemed like there were a couple of cases where the conversation around a threshold across the board may need to be looked at, because when you're under 1%, trying to continue to improve in a particular area is very difficult. So I don't know if that's a topic that we could put on the table generally, is there a threshold, and once you reach that threshold, you receive the points. But the idea of improvement, or maybe just dipping slightly but still within that 1%, is you should receive the points. I can think of at least one where we had a dropout rate issue, and there's not a lot more they could have done. Thank you.
Excellent comments. Anything further? Okay.
I'm speeding it up, President Narducci.
No, we're okay.
We're having really good discussion. It's very important. Okay, so the last is the return to student growth percentiles for traditional 912 students. So if you recall, at this time last year, we brought forth recommendations to include a subgroup improvement indicator for 912. We had some issues with that at a board level, and so we decided to do that as a one-year kind of a fill gap, and then you asked us to bring something back for an actual metric of growth. I do want to note that SGT is not included in this recommendation or this option because there's only one assessment at the high school level. So we would be recommending, I believe, the 2-year growth metric, which would be shown from 8th grade to 10th grade. It's the same 2-year growth metric that was used in the old accountability system with AIMS. And yes, this is very mathematical, and I'm sure Wendy can explain it, but what this in layman terms is telling us is that there's no impact between a 1-year growth or a 2-year growth. So a 2-year growth is fine. Good? Okay. So your options when they come before you in January or February would be to choose either an SGP growth model for high school or to stick with the subgroup improvement that was used in fiscal year 19. Okay. Okay. And Wendy's going to help me with the 912 alternative system.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Executive Director Williams. I am going to, President Narducci and members, to go over the suggestions for the 912 alternative model. So what we did as a AA TAC group is we knew it was our first year. So we have pages and pages and pages of histograms, minimums and maximums, and we looked at every component in every way we could. As you will recall, CCRI is 35 points of the alternative model. And looking at the histogram here, you can see that we are very much skewed to the right, leaving little growth opportunity and not a whole lot of differentiation. So we started talking, and we wanted to look at, and we knew we wanted to look at this, but prior to fiscal year 19, was 1 the right number, was 1.5, or was 2 the correct number? So we did have those schools that we had audited. Now, these were a nice group of schools that were big schools, little schools, rural schools that actually came into the audit. So we got lucky. So we had student level data. So although this is not perfect, it's one of the challenges on self-report data when it comes to modeling. So we did take this data and we went to the student level and we determined what their points would have been at 1.5 and at 2. And I would like you to keep in consideration that one thing we've noticed, and I've told you, I mentioned this in the previous one, is that a lot of schools, both the traditional and the alternative, stop reporting when they hit their magic number. So these numbers actually might be a little bit smaller. So when they hit 1, they don't fill out any of the other columns, or in the traditional, when they hit their 2, they quit filling it out. We're encouraging and we're working with the consortium that they keep going and filling it out, because these are great instructional spreadsheets and operational spreadsheets for a school to look at their course offerings. So based on this data, they are suggesting that we go to a 1.5. As you can see, the drop to 2 really does bring the scores down. That would have a significant change that we really can't determine with the data that we have, but 1.5 does seem reasonable. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this, and I'm going to put some notes because there's a couple other items that did not make it here, and I want to make sure we have it for the record. In addition, we're keeping the model the same. There's a couple modifications that they also wanted to add that a couple of the speakers spoke to. So on the traditional CCRI model, there is you've attended a 4-year university, and we did bring that over to the CCRI for the alternative. And we've reiterated over and over again that alternative students are different. Most of them go to the community college, and also some of them go to a trade school. So what the AA TAC would like to suggest and have you consider is to include in that component post-secondary enrollment in trade schools, community colleges, and university. What they would do then is drop it from a whole point to 0.5 because you're broadening the opportunities. So there's a balance there between adding those and then dropping the points. I'm going to type that really quick. And it's not going to be really pretty, so bear with me. And we can put that better in the notes later. And the other thing they wanted us to have you consider is the number of points needed to get a letter grade. So as you know, you have to have the 80 points for K-8 traditional. You have to have the 50 points for 9-12. We had set it at 60. We are asking that you consider to move it down to 50 to match the 9-12. Now, it doesn't have a huge impact. It's only going to add 2 more schools, but as they get better and better at reporting, we can include more schools. I'm sorry, I can't have that flash in red. It's okay, we're good now. And that is what we are wanting you to consider and maybe put out for comment to the field.
So President Narducci, members of the board, a couple points to note. When the board, if and when the board approves any of the changes, there are some changes that we as staff would recommend you do change, right? Like we don't have an EOC for Algebra 1 anymore. But we would recommend at that point, when you go to approve the changes, that it's approved for both the 1920 and 2021 school year, which means we'd be ahead of the game for the 2021 school year, and I think that's a big celebration. Staff has worked really hard since spring to ensure that you all have been updated of the changes that were coming for the 1920 school year. For the 18-19 school year, I think we approved them in April, changes. And so we would like to have some changes for the accountability system in place at the January board meeting so that schools do have the second half of the year to make some adjustments if needed. However, I do just want to tamper the expectations. There may be things that you've asked for that we may have to wait and start planning for the 21-22 school year. Just letting you all know. Okay? does the board feel comfortable of putting this out for a survey? The reason that staff, we would like to put it out is we would like to get some input from the field. We think that that input would help you all. It would help the ATAC, and we don't want to play catch up later. We think we've narrowed down the options enough that we would be able to have a pretty good survey to the field.
I'm in favor of that. What other comments do we have? Remember, go ahead.
President Narducci,
Okay.
Superintendent Hoffman, members. I am in favor of that with the caveat that if we can pull together that rural school information and include that in the survey so that the public has access to that information as well in making their comment, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Good. Member Baker.
President Narducci, maybe we could also look at the AccuPlacer point qualifier, because I think there's a new test, so the points have changed, but more importantly, at least in Pima County, and those of us sending kids to Pima Community College, they've gone away from AccuPlacer, and they've gone to multiple measures. So maybe the cleaner way to do it, just as an idea, is to make the point statement if the student qualifies for placement in Writing 101 or college algebra, and then let it be determined by whatever school they're going.
That's great.
Okay, just to look at that, please.
President Narducci, Member Baker, for both CCRI models, for 912 and alternative?
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Just look at it. I don't know enough to be, I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just suggesting that the issue be examined.
Member Kay.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members, I really like the idea of taking a look at that and seeing what information that yields. I don't know if this is the appropriate place because I know we're talking about getting a motion out to have the survey. But I do have two other areas that, if possible, to study for the future, not necessarily recommending a change to the formula, but we heard today in public comment, and it came up a couple times in appeals. I think the idea of looking at the middle junior high issue in accountability I think it's a real, potentially a real issue that needs to be studied to see what impact that those grade level configurations have, and whether those schools that are truly 6, 7, 8 or some 7, 8 combo are disadvantaged somehow in the current system. And the second area, we talked about it a couple of years ago. I don't know if there's the ability to study the volatility in the N count, if it in fact exists. So when we went from the 20 N count to the 10 N count, we had talked about whether there might be volatility from year to year for schools, and just looking at whether schools have remained fairly stable and are not impacted by that, or if there is some sort of volatility.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Baker, I feel like I'm playing ping pong here.
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, I'm trying to remember from the testimony, is the concern for any grade combination 6, 7, 8, or was the concern primarily focused on 7, 8?
President Narducci, Member Baker, staff will follow up with the representatives from Lake Havasu.
Okay.
Alrighty.
This is
Superintendent Hoffman.
Thank you, President Narducci. So first, of course, I support sending the survey out to get input and feedback from the field. That's a great idea. I like the idea of there being consistency and stability for the accountability system. I think that's something I've heard from school leaders across the know what we're working towards, and as much as we can do to help be transparent and help them to understand how the A through F grading system works, I think can be very helpful for schools and educators. And I also wanted to acknowledge the comments we heard where we heard from school leaders who expressed the feelings of shame for having the F letter grade. And I do think that that's something we should acknowledge and look into and see, because, when I was, for example, at the San Carlos Apache tribe last week, and, you hear from the students and the teachers about the needs that need to be met from the students, such as even their hygiene, sleep, and social emotional needs, and needs for counselors and therapists to address the various issues of students experiencing trauma. I think that I wish there was a way to measure all the work they're doing to support their social emotional needs. So I just want to acknowledge that that's something I'm thinking about, and that I wish there was an easier way for us to acknowledge that within the accountability system. But I think that's something we need to just keep thinking about and talking about. And but it's definitely on my radar. Wanted to make sure that they knew that those concerns.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Appreciate that. I think that was some of our comments several years ago as to the concerns that we had with the program that was being instituted and how people were going to feel and the other issues presented in the schools. So it's a lingering issue, and we support you in that effort, Superintendent Hoffman, as well. Anything else for presentation? All right. So we're just going to be looking for a motion to move forward for a survey. Okay. So do I have a motion to direct staff to release a public survey on the 2019, 2020, and 2020-21 A to F accountability system options as presented, with inclusion and consideration of all the comments that were made?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We will move on to 5E. Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board, I just want to double check lunches here. It is a hot lunch today. Do you want to take a lunch break, or do you want to move in with the agenda?
Go ahead.
We'll do a quick break.
Quick, 15 minutes? We'll do a 15-minute lunch, so we're back in, sorry, microphone. We'll do a 15-minute lunch, and we'll be back in session about 12:45. We're good. It is 12:47, and we're back on the record. And we have members Ruiz and Hoffman on the phone still.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Ruiz, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
It's probably on mute.
Appreciate that. We are going to commence, and we are going to move item 7A13, which is the surrender for David Troyer, to the first thing as we've come back on record. Director Williams.
President Narducci, item 7A13 is a surrender from David Troyer. Member K has a conflict and needs to be abstaining from this vote. And since we're going to lose that 6-vote quorum soon because members on the phone need to leave, I'm requesting that the board votes on 7A13 with Member K abstaining at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And do I have a motion to approve item 7A13?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
I have a first and a second, and any, no, there's nothing any. All in favor, say aye.
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 Superintendent Hoffman?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll go back on agenda. Thank you very much. Go back to item 5E. Director Williams.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, item 5E is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to determine noncompliance by Elfrida Elementary School District with the Uniform System of Financial Records, USFR, and to withhold state funds pursuant to ARS 15-272B. Ms. Bergen, who is our Assistant Attorney General, will be presenting this item. It will be a brief presentation, and if board members have any questions, just be aware it will take us a moment to reach out to the Auditor General's office as well as the business manager for Elfrida, because they are only calling in if the board members have questions.
Thank you.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. The Elfrida Elementary School District comes before the board regarding compliance with the Uniform System of Financial Records. Under Arizona law, school districts must spend and account for public funds in accordance with the Uniform System of Financial Records. The Auditor General is responsible for assessing whether school districts are in compliance with the USFR and notifying the Department of Noncompliance. Based on the Auditor General's report, the State Board of Education may direct the Superintendent of Public Instruction to withdraw any portion of state funds from school districts or charter schools that are out of compliance with the USFR. State funds will be withheld until the Auditor General reports that the school has come into compliance with the USFR. On July 9th of 2019, the Auditor General notified Elfrida Elementary School District that based on a review of the district's audit reports and the USFR compliance questionnaire for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, it was not in compliance with the USFR. In October of 2019, the district submitted a required corrective action plan. The Auditor General reviewed the corrective action plan and determined that the district had not made sufficient progress in correcting the deficiencies and remained in noncompliance. Board staff recommends that based on the Auditor General's reviews, the board determine that Elfrida Elementary School District is out of compliance with the USFR for the fiscal year ending 2018 and move to direct the Superintendent of Public Instruction to withhold 3% of the district's state aid until the Auditor General reports that the district is in compliance with the USFR.
President Narducci, members of the board, do any of the board members have any questions or concerns? And if not, I would recommend a motion.
Thank you. Seeing no questions or concerns, do I have a motion to determine, based on the Auditor General's reviews, that Elfrida Elementary School District is out of compliance with the USFR for the fiscal year ending in 2018, and move to direct the Superintendent of Public Instruction to withhold 3% of the district's state aid until the Auditor General reports that the district is in compliance with the USFR?
So moved.
I have a motion,
Second.
and I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5E, and thank you for the past report. 5F, thank you for the 5E report.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 5F is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to determine noncompliance by Morenci Unified School District with the Uniform System of Financial Records, USFR, and to withhold state funds pursuant to ARS 15-272B. If the board would like a recommendation on, or if the board would like a presentation on this item, please let us know. However, Superintendent Woodall is here, and staff is recommending that based on the Auditor General's reviews, the board determine that Morenci Unified School District is out of compliance with USFR for fiscal years ending June 30th of 2017 and June 30th of 2018, but to table any action pending the results of the Auditor General's status review. It is staff's understanding that Morenci Unified School District has fixed the issues that they're having with the USFR noncompliance, and that they are currently waiting for the Auditor General to come back to Morenci and to ensure that they are in compliance. So if the board members don't have any questions for myself, the Assistant Attorney General, the Auditor General, or Superintendent Woodall, I'd recommend a motion.
Fantastic. Any questions on the phone? Hearing none, do I have a motion to determine, based on the Auditor General's reviews, that Morenci Unified School District is out of compliance with the USFR for the fiscal years ending in June 30th, 2017 and June 30th, 2018, but to table any action pending the results of the Auditor General's status review? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll seek an update from Director Williams on item G.
President Arducci, members of the board, this is an update on rulemaking procedures for R7-2-619 renewal requirements. If no members of the board have any questions, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Yeah, this is good.
Any questions about the renewal requirements that were in their books? None. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5H. Director Williams.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 5H is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures on R7-2-615.01 special education endorsement. If there are no questions for the staff, then I would recommend moving a motion.
Any questions based on the materials that were in our items? None? Do I have a motion to open rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2-615.01 special education endorsement?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Passes. Thank you. 5I. Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board, item 5I is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures on AAC Title VII, Article 13, Conduct. This is involving the summary suspensions. If board members have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for them.
Any comments regarding the materials and the addition? On the phone, any comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures on AAC Title VII, Article 13, Conduct?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a
Second.
second? I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5J.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 5J is presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures on R7-2-604 educator prep program definitions. If the board members do not have any questions in this item, I recommend a motion.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2-604 Educator Preparation Program definitions?
So moved.
I have a motion, and do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
There we go. Thank you. The ayes have it. Move on to 5K, Director Williams.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 5K is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures on R7-2-306 English language learner programs. If board members do not have any questions, I would recommend a motion.
Any questions or comments on the materials that we've read? None. Do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2-306 English language learner programs?
So moved.
Motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5L is executive session. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the scope of work for the request for proposals for the statewide assessment?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it. We'll move into executive session and move the phones over there, so it'll give us about 3 minutes. Thank you. Issue. Okay, we're good. Back on the record at approximately 1:15. And do I have a motion to approve the scope of...
President Arducci, we just need to make sure that we need to know who's still on the line.
Oh, okay, I got thumbs up.
Superintendent Hoffman, are you still on the phone?
Oh, I heard that, but not in the...
Superintendent Hoffman, you're on the phone, correct?
Yes, can you hear me?
Thank you. Member Ruiz?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on the phone.
And Member Mack?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, President
Thank
Arducci.
you. With that, do I have a motion to approve the scope of work and direct the Department of Education to release the statewide request for proposals by December 31st, 2019?
So moved.
With the motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Are we going to lose some members now?
I believe Member Ruiz is leaving now, and Superintendent Hoffman?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Happy holidays to both of you.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 6, which is a call to the public, and this is the time for the public to comment on items on the certification enforcement actions consent agenda. Do we have any requests to speak?
President Arducci, we have no request to speak for this call to the public.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7, consent agenda. We've already dealt with item 7A13. So with the consent agenda for certification enforcement actions, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for enforcement action items 7A1 through 7A12 and item 7B? I have a motion by Member Burton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Kay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move down to item A, call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items that are on the general session of enforcement actions. Director Williams, do we have anybody that is asked to speak?
President Arducci, we do. Do you still want to keep these as at 2 minutes as well?
If possible, yes.
Okay. First up, we have Amy Frazier, followed by Robert Jarvis.
Good afternoon. If it's okay, I'll go first. My name is Robert Jarvis. Good afternoon, President Arducci. I guess Superintendent's not all on the phone. Good afternoon to members of the board. This matter is before the board. We're asking that the board accept the recommendation as is indicated in the settlement agreement. It was lengthy stipulated facts, and hopefully all of you have been able to at least review those or skim through those. It was quite an ordeal for Ms. Frazier at the very beginning of all this, and it calls for a 3-year suspension of her certificate. We are in agreement with that, obviously, because we signed the settlement, but I think it's also important, besides the stipulated facts that are there, to kind of understand Ms. Frazier has gone through quite a lot. This was back in 2015 when this started, July 2000. I got involved in July 2015. It was the beginning of 2015 when these alleged incidents, well, the allegations came. Ms. Frazier has gone through unwarranted and irresponsible media coverage regarding this, false allegations that were made during that time. search warrants that were essentially unfounded, that were served and executed. She had a young son at the time that also went through the trauma of all that. As indicated in the stipulation of facts, we did go through the criminal process. You'll notice that the resolution of that, rather than going through a trial, which we were ready to do, that there was a diversion and a no admission diversion. So there was no admission to it. And this is, if you're not totally familiar with the county prosecutor's office, that such a resolution is very, very, very rare. And we entered that, and Ms. Fraser entered that rather than go to trial. One, you don't know what's going to happen in trial. Two, the time, and just to get it done, she had by that time gone through 2.5, almost 3 years of this, and so it was time to get that done. Now she's going through this process as well. Another thing is that when we go through this, one of the things that she's also had to work with is that of all the administrators and supervisors that were involved regarding the things that were happening at that charter school, she's the only one that was focused on. We don't know why, but that's been something that she's had to carry as well. It's also important that since that time, since 2015 or July, when she was first contacted by the law enforcement, that she has not held a position, a working position that required a certificate, the teaching certificate. She had to find other work, which she has, but it wasn't anything that required a certificate. So I think that's important for the board to consider as well, that she's essentially been suspended since 2015, July 2015. So at this point, Ms. Fraser is ready to really put this behind her, finally, after 5 years, almost 5 years of going through all of this. We appreciate the consideration of the board. The agreement requires or indicates the 3-year suspension as the date, from the date it is accepted. I wish there were a way to be able to backdate that in any way, but we do ask the board to accept the recommendation as stipulated.
Thank you.
Could I just answer questions?
I don't know if they have any questions.
This is a time for the public comment. The board doesn't ask questions during public comment.
I mean, everything you said, that is pretty accurate. It was an unfortunate scenario where a lot of administrators were involved, but I was the only one targeted for their own internal reasons. Did take a big part of my life. My whole life was children. I wanted to be a teacher since I was 3 years old, and unfortunately, this situation happened where where this teacher got involved in a situation with a student, a 17-year-old student, and I was the one that was, even though I reported it to my superiors, I was the one that was targeted and charged, even after the officers interviewed everyone else as well. I was the only one that was brought forth any kind of consequence.
Thank you. Thank you. Any others?
I'm sorry, that concludes the call to the public.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9, and I'd like to take these in a single motion from 9A 1 through 6. If that's okay with the board. Do I have a motion to approve items 9A through 9A1 through 9A6?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Kay.
Second.
I have a second by Member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have anybody on the phone still?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. We'll move down to item 9B. Director Williams.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 9B is a presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation of the PPAC to suspend any and all certificates of Peter Chesebro for a period of 1 year. If members have any questions in regard to 9B, I am available.
Thank you. Member Burton.
I don't have questions, but while I was reviewing this case, it seemed to me that the acts described in the findings of facts and conclusions of law warrant a much more serious consequence than was recommended by PPAC. In cases similar to this one, this board has historically taken stronger action. The fact, I don't really want to go into the details, but he kissed a female student while in a position of authority as an administrator, defying the direction of his supervisors, to stop all communication. This is, in my mind, unprofessional and immoral conduct, and I think we just need to have stronger consequences for these actions. I mean, I would recommend that we reject the PPAC's recommendation and that we revoke the certificate.
Thank you, Member Burton. I'm in agreement with you. Any further discussion? Member Burton, can I have a motion in that regard?
Yeah, I move to adopt the findings of facts and conclusions of law and reject the recommendation of PPAC because of the PPAC's recommendation is not supported by the unprofessional and immoral acts described in the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and move to revoke any and all certificates held by Peter Chesebro, and that all states and territories be so notified.
Thank you. I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Kay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. 9B, Director Williams.
President Arducci,
Sorry, 9C.
9C is a presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation of the PPAC to approve the application for certification of Krista Nope. I am available for any questions.
Do you have any comment? Member Burton.
Yes,
That's okay.
I apologize. So this is a difficult situation, but to me, Ms. Nope has been through a lot in this past year. The incident that occurred it hasn't even been 12 months, and I believe she should just continue to work on herself and her health so that she can be the best parent for her child and the best teacher for her future students. With that being said, I'm not comfortable with approving this recommendation for certification, but I'd like to hear from the board as to a period of time. I mean, I was thinking at least 2 years, but I'd like to hear what other board members think.
Yeah, I agree.
This is Member Mack.
Good. Good, Member Mack.
Oh, I was thinking along a very similar line. I was thinking 3 years, but I could be willing to consider 2 years as well.
Well, 3.
And maybe revisit it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm in line with your thinking as well, Member Burton, with respect to the 2 years. Oh, could go 3, but 2 years is fine with me.
That's how I'm feeling.
She needs more time.
I was sort of on the fence. She will have to go before PPAC after 2 years, correct?
President Arducci, Member Burton, that is correct.
Any other comments with respect to that? Member Burton, could I have a motion?
Sure. So I move to adopt the findings and fact, conclusions of law, and reject the recommendation of PPAC because the recommendation is not supported by the unprofessional acts described in the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and move to deny the application for certification for Krista Nope for a period of 2 years, and that all states and territories be so notified.
Thank you. We have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Member Mack?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes. Move on to item 9D. Director Williams.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 5D is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the motion for rehearing regarding educator Jennifer Boss, case number 2017-243. Mr. Cohen, Ms. Boss's lawyer representation, is here today.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, come on up. And we'll, 5 minutes.
Excuse me, Mr. Braden, you just brought this up here. Could I move this?
What's that?
Yeah. Thank you.
So, Mr. Cohen, 5 minutes, okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, thank you. I'm here today seeking procedural due process and substantive justice for my client, Jennifer Boss. Jennifer Boss was denied due process when the chair of the PPAC, without any prior notice, without any authority of law, statute, or case law, rule, statute, or case law, denied her the right to submit her proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law after the evidentiary portion of the PPAC hearing. What that means as a practical matter is that after the evidence presented, which no one can know for sure in advance what it will be, but after the evidence is presented, the documents have been submitted, the witnesses have been cross-examined, at that point, my position was that we should now be allowed to submit proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law so that you could have our input on what evidence matters and how it should be integrated to reach a resolution. The state had already submitted its own proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law beforehand, but there's no rule that talks about when that will be done, no case, no statute. I pressed because I thought that it only made sense to submit a findings of facts and conclusion of law after the hearing's over when you know what's there. But the chair said that it would be inconvenient for the committee to come back again after receiving proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law and denied my request. So what the practical effect was that the findings of facts and conclusion of law proposed by the state were given to the committee, and that's all they considered. They didn't consider anything about what actually went in because the findings of facts and conclusions of law were based on what had been anticipated, but not what actually went in, and certainly didn't have our version of what was submitted or how it should all be integrated. And I believe, I'm very comfortable in saying that's a denial of due process. She doesn't have the right to have her version considered by the committee. I can't say what the committee might have done differently, nor can anyone in this room, because the committee didn't hear our presentation and therefore our integration of the evidence and our interpretation of what it all meant. The result of that is that what you received was a factual account that was based only on what the state had submitted, and a recommendation that was based only on what the state had submitted. Now, you may be saying, well, they heard all the evidence. That's true, but the evidence is presented over a period of hours, and the findings of facts and conclusions of law focus in on what each side believes the evidence is, how it all integrates with what's been presented in documents and testimony, and makes recommendations about what the findings should be. Instead, they voted only on what the state had proposed. And we believe that that was a denial of due process. It also has the impact of having a denial of substantive justice, because what you see and make your decision on are findings that are based on what the state allows or what the state contended, nothing else. So what was the consequence of that? And I know you've read all the materials. I appreciate how thorough you are. I've sat in a few other days and today. But what was the consequence of that? There are a number of them, and I'll just highlight some here. One has to do with the arrest that took place in which Jennifer Boss was accused of resisting arrest. We've never denied that happened. We've never denied she was convicted. We've never denied she was sentenced to various things as a matter of criminal law, but she also fulfilled all of her punishment. The issue that's been focused on is the fact that Jennifer Boss has appealed through all the procedures that are available to her that finding, and she maintains personally that she was innocent. People in this country, unfortunately, in our system of justice, sometimes don't get justice and do believe that they're innocent. And there are procedures that are available to express that, and she's followed the procedures, and yet she's to be criticized and punished here to the extent of losing her license because she's exercised her rights, the right every citizen has to avail themselves of these various procedures for addressing grievances. And she holds the opinion she was innocent. She's entitled to have that as a citizen of the country. Her application, what was represented to you was that she misrepresented on her application. What was missing from the finding of facts is that every single thing she said on the application was true based on the questions that were asked. The criticism that comes out on the findings of facts and conclusions of law as you get them is that she didn't comply or she didn't cooperate. In fact, whenever she was asked any question about her answers on the application, she elaborated and gave more information. There were things that happened after the application went in, and she updated whenever she was asked anything about them. That doesn't come through in the statement of facts. Another issue has to do with the nursing board finding. The nursing board finding was based almost exclusively on a mental health examination that was done. What the findings of fact do not go into, they mention at the end in mitigation, but what they do not go into is all the evidence we submitted that showed that every mental health care provider or anyone who commented on her mental health before or after all said that she was stable. And in fact, that did influence the board to the extent of mitigation, but it should have been in the section which talked about that as an issue. The traffic stop for reckless driving is I'll be very quick in finishing up, Mr. Chairman. The traffic stop which was for supposedly reckless driving. What you saw there was the state's interpretation of what was in a police report. What you didn't see was her account of what happened, and what you didn't see was anything from the officer who was actually there in the scene, because they never talked to the officer, and they didn't have the officer as a witness. So once again, you had a distorted view of the facts based upon what the state had stated. I could go on to other things, but I appreciate my time is gone. What you're doing here today is important. It's important for Jennifer Boss, obviously. But it's also important for this board to take the position that whatever our decisions are, and however you decide this case, it will be based on due process. It will not just be based on someone's arbitrary decision, and I'm not trying to criticize the chair personally, but professionally, her arbitrary, unsupported decision not to allow my client to submit a statement of what the evidence was that actually went in, but rather simply to go forward with what had been previously submitted and decide and have the committee act upon and make recommendations based upon that. The action you take today sends a message about your view of due process and substantive justice to the public that you serve and to the students who are part of that public. And again, this is an ideal that's just fundamental to civics and civics classes that are taught throughout the schools. So I would urge you to allow a rehearing, not to hear the entire case, not to submit new evidence, but just to allow us to present our findings of fact and law, our proposed findings, have the committee meet and decide what it will do from there, and then come back to you, and you'll take what action you think are appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. I'd like to hear from the state if we can. And 5 minutes as well, and then once you hear the buzzer, though, you can conclude. Just do your argument and then conclude. That's fine.
I will do that. Thank
Thanks.
you. President Narducci, members of the board, I'd like to briefly respond to some of the arguments both in the papers as well as what were made in the hearing. He has three bases for the motion for rehearing. The first is that there's an irregularity in the proceeding or an abuse of discretion that resulted in a deprival of a fair hearing. You have to show both parts of that, both the irregularity in the proceeding or abuse of discretion and deprival of a fair hearing. The state would submit that that, in fact, did not happen. He certainly would be have been allowed to present proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law at the hearing. He had the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law that I drafted for the state as of May 20th. The hearing was not until July 10. He also had the opportunity in oral argument to address any concerns he had with the state's proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law at the hearing. He chose not to do that. This would not also be considered a deprival of a fair hearing. I'm not quite sure how he expects to show that. I've still never seen what he would have submitted as a proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law. Had he submitted something with this motion for rehearing, that would give us something to consider. The PPAC went through extraordinary pains, and you can see it in the deliberations in the transcript, to look at each fact individually. It's to each one of the incidents
And they voted on those. We're under certain time constraints with that hearing, but they did a great job in considering everything. The other argument he made in the papers was that this was an excessive penalty revocation. I submit that it's not an excessive penalty to receive a revocation when one has been convicted of resisting arrest. That's been very consistent in other cases that this board has considered for other teachers. And he seems to be focused on the fact that his client's mental health or ability to teach was somehow not dealt with in the hearing. In fact, he submitted letters from his mental health providers, and the PPAC members did consider those. His client's fitness to teach, unfortunately, is not always something that we consider when we're looking at unprofessional conduct. And when someone commits the crime of resisting arrest and is convicted the crime of resisting arrest, and it's been affirmed by the State Court of Appeals several times, that's a problem. It's also a problem when someone who is in a position of public trust continues to assert that the conviction and the decisions on the appeals are unwarranted, that the officer, in fact, was sexually abusing her, and that the officer perjured himself. So those are all the allegations of professional conduct or unprofessional conduct that the state had looked at and submitted at the hearing. And it's our belief that the PPAC members did a very thorough job of considering everything and resulting in the recommendation that this board, in fact, approved its last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just stay up there for a little bit? Are there any questions for the state? Are there any questions for Mr. Cohen? One thing this board does stand for, and I think all state boards stand for, is due process. So we just want to make sure that the due process was followed. And in your mind, there was no issue of due process violations, correct?
There was not.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Any discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to proceed with option 1 as presented by affirming the decision and denying Jennifer Boss's motion for rehearing because of her failure to establish any basis under Board Rule R7-2-709 Cap B to merit a rehearing in the matter?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Burton. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. That accomplishes all of item 9, and we'll move on to item 10.
President Arducci, members of the board, item 10 is I believe there are people carpooling down to Yuma for our meeting. So Member Mack, can I say your name? Member Wellborn will be reaching out to you for carpooling. Maybe she's not on the phone. I'm sorry?
Swing through Tucson?
Oh, you just dropped your...
Sorry, it's not really on the way. About that. If you were to come up, maybe there's a reason we should come through.
But the January board meeting will be in Yuma, and board staff is working with Arizona Western's staff to have like a learning day because Arizona Western is doing a lot of great work with the Yuma high schools. And I think it'd be interesting to learn how Dr. Kaur has utilized Arizona Western and then went down to the high school and has gone up to the universities to form a really complete bridge for the students in Yuma.
So with our meeting in Yuma, are the school administrators, et cetera, going to be aware that we're there in case they want to come out and? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and our meeting's going to be at Dr. Corr's campus, or is it someplace else?
President Arducci is being held on Arizona Western's campus.
At 10 a.m.
I'm sorry?
10 a.m.
At 10 a.m.
Okay, 10 a.m., 3-hour drive from Phoenix on the morning. How far is it from Tucson?
I don't know.
It's about the same, I think.
Member Bakers, you're the only one driving that morning.
Oh, sorry.
So,
That's 3
but
hours for me.
There are other ideas for program pre and post. Outside of the board meeting, there's going to be activities at the university.
President Arducci, Member Wellborn, we're working on that yet.
Okay,
I'm
TBD.
trying.
TBD.
TBD.
Got it.
Fantastic. Anything else? Anything else from the board members? Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Happy holidays to you, too.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Everyone else has left the call.